Okay, cool.
Okay, cool.
Yes, let's go.
Can you bring up the Steam, my Steam channel on the other screen and turn the sound
Okay.
on, so we can see
It's
all
all-
your lovely comments.
Right, there we go. Cool.
Okay, nice. Okay, so
Are we audible?
I hope we're audible
Yes.
and everyone can hear.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, so I decided that I wanted to do a series of videos based on cosplayers and their costumes, interviewing them, chatting to them, sharing tips and finding out about their craft and art.
Unfortunately, they couldn't get any of those, so they got me instead.
This is my fiance Jamie, otherwise known as Resilient Printing, and he will be the first person I interview, as we just want to do a first session to test everyone out, test this format out, and if you would like, you're a cosplayer and you'd like to do one of these interviews, I have an application form on my link tree on my website or Instagram. Okay, let's get started.
Hello.
So, hello. So, who are you?
It's a good question, actually. I've been wondering that my entire life. Okay, so I am... I guess I'll go with the cosplay name. I'm Resilient Prints, also known as Resilient Mini Prints. I started out... I met this really crazy woman who decided she wanted to be with me, and I really liked. Yeah, no, I'm a very romantic person. So basically, she was doing all these cosplay stuff, and we actually met at MCM, Comic Con in the UK, if you don't know that. And I really liked all the cosplay she was doing. But I was telling myself, oh no, I'll never get into that. Oh, I'm too thick to do that. I can't do any of that stuff properly. And then somehow this amazing but very crazy, dangerous woman.
I am neither of those things.
Yes. Anyway, so this amazing woman eventually kept encouraging me to do it, and I just started. I started off trying to do a foam version of this. And that didn't quite work out. I'm not so good with the foam blades. She's much better with knives than I am in many different ways. So I did a foam version of this. It didn't go too well. I did a few more things in foam, couldn't really get a hold of it. And then you got me a FDM 3D printer. Now previously I had a Resin 3D printer. I still have a Resin 3D printer. Which I used to print various different minis for tabletop games, and that's where my business started, is printing tabletop minis, and that's what I did, and I made a decent earning from that, not huge but decent, but never thought of it in terms of cosplay. And then you got me a FDM printer for, I believe it was 2 Christmases ago.
Yeah,
This
it
point
was really
time flies.
good. I got your shed to put it in.
And I started printing, and technically this was one of the first things I printed, but the first version of this, and there were many issues with it, so I had to abandon it, and I ended up with this. See, my biggest issue is I'm actually kind of a massive perfectionist.
So what materials is this piece made out of?
Right.
Because this is mostly what you do with your 3D prints. So go through the process of materials.
So I print in 2 different materials depending on what the customer wants. So this was printed with PLA, which is a form of plastic filament on a spool. You print it on an FDM style printer through a nozzle, and this whole thing is made out of that. It's PLA, it's plastic, it's completely safe, non-toxic. As long as you don't breathe it in or anything, or eat it or anything like that, you should be fine. It was then painted with a few different paints, mostly Games Workshop paints, because they do really good. Their paints are really good if you want a nice even flat finish. They can actually hide
they work
a lot
very
of
well on
mistakes.
foam as well. So if you
want
want to prime a piece of foam that doesn't need to be bent, like a prop, they're great.
Yeah.
I've used them quite a few times. Sorry.
So we kind of answered the first 3 questions.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So anyway, asking number 3 just to get that
Okay, so how long does it take you to make your pieces?
Right. So, like, I guess it's something a lot of cosplayers could relate to. There's a part of me that wants to go, oh, it'll only take like a month or two if you just work solidly at it. But the reality is, lots of things get in the way, and it takes a lot longer than this. Like, this took me a year to make. Not because I'm lazy, although I am lazy, but not for this.
No, you
but
have
just
like
because,
10 versions.
Well, no. The other thing you might see, I have more versions of.
We'll put them all out one day.
This only has 2 versions. But, yeah, like, I think standard time for me, if I really pushed myself and was really efficient with everything, which I'm really not, would be like 2 months, I would say. Whereas, you know, obviously other things get in the way. So it can take 6 months or more, depending on the piece. Like a full cosplay, that'll take me about a year, maybe 2 years, depending on how complicated it is. And I am working on the full armour of this. This isn't even done, by the way. I actually still need to add detail paint, lenses to the eyes, and electronics, which I will be showing on my Instagram, which is just down there. I'm pointing to the text, not anything else.
What would you recommend for somebody using both PLA and resin printers, like the first things they need to actually think about and know about?
First of all, okay. The absolute first thing you need to realise is, are you patient? Be patient. There are a lot of people, a lot of YouTubers out there who will say, well, you can print in so little time if you do this, this and that. But here's the thing. The slower you print, the more reliable and repeatable your results will be. And those are the 2 most important things in 3D printing, reliability and repeatability. Is, can you print something reliably, i.e. it doesn't fail, and can you print something repeatably, i.e. you can print it multiple times if you have to sell it, or you need multiple variations on it, you can just print it. Another thing to work out is you've got to be disciplined, because levelling the bed is hard. It's annoying. It's tedious. I've probably spent more time levelling the bed than I've ever actually spent printing at some points. And I guess learn to keep an eye on it. You've got to almost treat it like a child. You really got to baby your 3D printer. I've never been in a position where I could just leave it for hours and hours and hours and not have something go wrong. I've always had to check on it, make sure the filament isn't tangled, make sure the bed hasn't unleveled itself, which sometimes happens, make sure the heat is level, because I do all my printing in a shed, so the heat isn't a room temperature room. I have to really think about things like heat and stuff like that.
You also use things in the shed, and this might be interesting for people that do outdoor work. We recently got one of the small fan heaters, and that's really helped. So as long as your shed's pretty well built, basically it will hold on to heat nicely, particularly if it's metal. So putting a fan in it will create a room temperature environment where it wasn't before. So you've said a lot about filament. What do you use to treat the filament? How do you process it?
Right. So my technique is constantly evolving, so what I say now may not be true even a couple months down the line, but here's what my current process is. So what I do now is, at first I was really clocked onto the using UV resin from my resin prints. So I have a bottle of UV resin, and you know, you basically paint that all over the piece once it's sanded, and then you cure it with sunlight or UV rays of some kind, and then you sand that, and it's relatively smooth, and you maybe have to do that 2 or 3 times and you get a decently smooth finish. The problem was, as I said, I'm a perfectionist, so that wasn't good enough for me. Oh god, no, it wasn't not. And I was stressed over all sorts of different things that I was printing that still weren't coming out smooth just by doing that. And what I have found out is there is a thing you can use called Bondo, right? And it's very popular in America. They use it all the time for their 3D prints. It's a lot harder to get hold of here. You can get it from eBay though. And what I do now is, before I do anything else, I sand this at 60 grit, and then I slather the whole thing in a layer of Bondo, right? And that really helps to deal with any unevenness and all that. It sands so beautifully. So even if you end up in my position as we put a little bit too much Bondo on, it sands so well. It just a bit of the old motion that every lad knows, and you know, you'll get it smooth.
So what would you say is the main health and safety risks of a PLA process rather than other things?
Well, it's the dust.
The main thing you need to watch
It's
for?
the dust, especially if as you're dealing with Bondo, which is a very toxic substance, breathed in or anything. You need to wear a respirator. Goggles would be good to make sure it doesn't get in your eyes. Gloves. Make sure you're wearing an apron so it doesn't get on your clothes, because those are really, really hard to wash. And that's PLA. I mean, resin's in a whole different, even more dangerous kettle of fish, but I don't know how relevant that'll be to this.
We've talked quite a lot about your PLA
Yes.
process, as you've also printed a lot of resin,
Right.
and you have a lot of lovely examples of those resin. Why don't you tell us about how the resin process starts from beginning to end?
Right. So the resin process compared to the FDM. So with a resin printer, you have a vat, and at the bottom of the vat is this stretched taut plastic called a FEP sheet, right? And this FEP sheet, below the FEP sheet is a screen. Usually it's the same sort of screens they put in phones and tablets, but what it is it shoots UV light up through into that stretched plastic when the build plate is lowered down, and it then rises up, and that's the layer cured when it shoots the UV thing, and it does that multiple times until you get a finished piece. My process is I try to print at 0.02 layer height for my resin printer, and I usually spend anywhere from a day to 2 days on supports, because you have to support the model so that things don't print in thin air and then they don't peel off when the when the build plate rises. And then prints are really fast on the newer resin printer that I have, which is the Elegoo Saturn. They're much faster. I can just in general, I can get a print done like if I'm printing like a squad of 10 little wee plastic men compatible with most major war games, I can get that done in less than a day at 7 hours, and then spend an hour or two taking off all the supports, cleaning them up a little bit, curing them, putting them in water or alcohol depending on what resin I'm using.
Do you have any advice when it comes to curing methods? Because I know that curing's quite complicated as a thing.
So, resin minis aren't the worst things to cure. You can get a UV lamp from Amazon, and they actually sell. If you look for UV resin curing kits for printers on Amazon, they actually will sell on Amazon a lamp with a little turntable, electric turntable, and all you need to do is put the lamp down, put however many minis you want on the turntable, and it'll spin round, and wait anywhere from a minute, maybe a little bit longer depending on the resin, and it'll be cured and safe to touch and safe to do what you need to do with, and it's non-toxic at that point. So the only advice I give is make sure you cure your minis really, really well. Don't over cure them. Like, don't leave them for, I would say, maximum 2 minutes, and most of the time I wouldn't even, I'd say 1 minute's too long, but it really does depend. Sometimes I've had really stupid minis. They don't cure properly. They don't do what I tell them.
I think that was the water washable resin.
Yeah,
I
would say if anyone wants to get into 3D printing, even though water washable resin, it clears off with water, even though that sounds great because you only have to buy expensive IPA, isopropyl alcohol, it's actually not good. I find it's much more temperamental. I can't hollow things because it always seems to crack when you hollow things. It's just generally weaker and more brittle as well, even when you've cured it within an inch of its life. I've just to see how strong it would be, I've cured water washable things till they're almost like crispy, right? Like because they go a bit funny if you over cure them. I've cured them that long, and they still just break much more easily. Like I could drop one of my normal resin that you just wash with alcohol, I can drop them on the floor, and the floor is more likely to break than the mini, and that's before you add things like tenacious and things like that, which is another thing you can do. They're fine, but water washable just doesn't seem to work as well. Maybe other people got a better method than me, and they're welcome to do their methods. I'm not trying to claim to be an expert here.
So when it comes to slightly larger pieces in a resin printer, do you have any advice for that, or kind of discuss how that sort of works rather than a small piece?
Learn how to use software like Mesh Mixer to cut things up, because the thing with any printer, whether it's FDM or resin, is you're going to get eventually a print that cannot fit on a build plate on its own, and you need to cut it up. Now, a lot of the resin printers, a lot of the resin models you can get are pre-sliced, so you can just put them in your slice, and you don't have to worry about cutting them up there in pieces. Much like how you'd get if you played any miniature war games, you'd get a box and the things would be in bits, and it's a very similar process to that. But especially some minis, they make them as a whole sculpture or something, and you're like, oh, that'd be really good on my resin printer, and they just haven't cut it up properly for a resin printer, so you have to size it and cut it, and then put it on your slicer. Like, I use Lychee, which is my slice of choice, and then do all that stuff. That's a whole other thing I can talk about if you want. I can go into the actual, like the full thing where you slice it and print it.
Tell us all about the digital process rather than just the physical process.
Okay.
Because a lot of people, I've seen this before, and even I had this misconception as a seamstress and foam craftsman, is that 3D printing is simple and easy in some way in comparison to making foam stuff. But as I got deep into it, and I learned from you and lots of other people that it's a complete art form of its own. Yeah. It's a complete art form of its own, and it's a complete different construction method.
Yeah.
And the digital part of it is very important. So the digital element of it, do you want to kind of explain some like ground kind of area of that?
So even though, resin and FDM printers are two very different things, and they're quite different software. But they both use different versions of what's called a slicer. Okay? So what a slicer does is it's the program that tells the 3D printer how to print the model. Right? Now, for resin printers, I use software called Lychee. It's free software, you can get it, it works really well. But what it does is you go into that software and you need to support the model. So what happens is you go layer by layer, which is a very tedious process depending on the mini. You go layer by layer and you see, is that layer printing as part of the connected model, or is it just printing in mid-air basically? And that's bad. If it's printing in mid-air, it's called what's called an island. Then you need to support it with a support. And you go through the whole model and you make a whole load of supports, and that can take a very, very long time. A lot of people, I won't say anything before I say something I can't take back, but a lot of people are wrong when they say just auto support it, because they just don't want to deal with the tedium of it. Auto supports never support all the islands. You have to go in and support it yourself. And often, even if you think, oh well, I'll just use auto supports to get most of them and then do the rest myself. No, because auto supports often waste resin through supporting things that don't need supports and not supporting the things that do need supports. It's very frustrating. So you have to do it manually, and it's a very tedious process.
So would you say it's kind of similar to in photography when you have to manually light retouch when you go in at all the different areas rather than auto light correction?
Yeah. Because
that doesn't work very well at all. Auto light correction doesn't do what you want it to do, hardly at all.
Yeah.
So with resin printers, they're a whole different mechanism. They do resin, which for anyone who's used resin,
it's very toxic. It's
very
smelly.
Very toxic. So
and just because you don't mind the smells of resin,
health and safety precautions you need to take. So from a background of somebody that does epoxy resins, I know that epoxy resins contain cancer-causing odourless fumes. So odourless fumes are a thing. So if you think, oh, it doesn't have a smell, therefore it isn't dangerous, that's not quite how those chemicals work. And UV resin's very similar as well, because there are different types and the ones. So your health and safety precautions, what you need to bear in mind, and the things that most people don't know.
Right. So, first of all, there are a lot of people who will scream into their blue in their face that they aren't affected by resin, that they will never be affected by it, that they don't have any breathing problems, they don't have any loopiness. Doesn't matter. Resin fumes are toxic, whether you can smell them or not, whether you filtered them or not. They are toxic. You need to make sure you do your resin prints in an insulated environment where you can take away all those bad fumes. So, make an aircon unit, make some kind of ventilation system that can deal with those fumes, because they are toxic and they will hurt you in the long run, if not the short run. Okay, just because you can't smell them doesn't mean they're not there. Okay, so what I would do is, like I said, ventilation system. DIY it yourself if you have to. Make sure it's not in a room that anyone else can have access to. Make sure it's far away enough from everyone that you're still not going to breathe it in, because even 2 or 3 rooms away it can still be harmful and dangerous.
Yeah.
Make sure you wear gloves, nitrite gloves at all times. Latex does disintegrate, so use nitrite gloves. And wear an apron of some kind to make sure the drips from the resin don't get on your clothes, because it's a liquid, right? In its liquid state, it's drippy. It's annoying. And make sure all areas that you use this printer in are covered with some kind of cloth or something to stop the resin dripping onto the floor, onto tables. Because, tell you what, cured resin's really hard to get out of a table. Trust me.
Also, the other thing that I don't know if you remember, that if you actually have any resin on your gloves, when it is actually in the middle of curing, like it's exposed to the sun or UV light, it will burn your hand because it's an endothermic chemical. So the reaction is with heat.
Yeah.
So I actually had this happen to me when we were doing some things together, and we were cleaning some prints. I had my hand in the sun and it started getting really, really hot on my actual gloves, and I had to rip them straight off. So that's definitely something to consider. So what things in the world of 3D printing to have the most future potential, as it's a new industry with a lot of invention?
Okay.
Where do you think it's going
right
as
now?
an actual
I
industry?
think resin printers have the most potential. FDM's they're still very useful. Obviously, I wouldn't have printed this without it, but I think in terms of actual evolution, I think resin printers are sort of going above and beyond right now. I think there's a lot of competition in the space between different companies. The prices are constantly going down. I was able to get my first resin printer for very, very cheap. At one point they were thousands. When I first started looking into resin printers, they were thousands for the basic models, and now they're still somewhat expensive. We're still talking £200-300, but much cheaper than how they used to be, and in some cases much cheaper than FDM printers. I think belt printers, which are FDM printers called belt printers, where it prints on a conveyor belt system.
Oh yeah, they love.
So you basically have infinite length, right? They are looking interesting to me, but I think they've got quite a lot of bugs to work out. But yeah, I think resin printers are going. I think the big thing with resin printers is size. People want to print bigger and bigger things, and current resin printers, the biggest resin printer is really expensive for something that's about the size of an Ender 3, which is one of the smaller FDM printers you can get. Like the big thing with FDM is that it's bigger. So that's why I'd use for cosplay. I'd use my resin printer for minis. And that's how my business works. I print resin minis and FDM PLA props like this.
So when it comes to the kind of innovation in the 3D printing world, there's lots of non-prop and non-artistic innovation. What do you think of some of the interesting innovations when it comes to medical science and reconstructing printing bones? Because that seems very interesting.
For many years, resin printing was used for two things industrially. It was used for prototyping toys and action figures and miniatures. Games Workshop used 3D printers before it was cool. And it was used for dental work. right? Because you could use a resin printer to make dentures for people really easily, just program in what you needed. I think that we're starting to get things where you get food 3D printers where it's based on the FDM technology of, you know, putting material, in this case an edible material, through the nozzle and then it squirts it out in a shape.
There is two very interesting fields. I don't know if you know about them. There's the using the fibres from actual bone material, like human bone material, that's extra, like after somebody's died. It's quite grim, but they grind down the bone material and they use like cell glue to basically turn it into a version of PLA and reconstruct bones from it, and the bones actually function.
Yeah, I think there's so many,
and they're less harmful.
There's so many practical applications in the field of medicine for 3D printing. You can imagine with anything really. You can just say if someone needs a hand replaced, for instance, probably not now, but in the future, they could 3D print a robotic replacement.
Well, there's actually a boy whose dad 3D printed a prosthetic arm.
Yeah, well, we are at the point where people are 3D printing prostheses. They are printing hands and stuff. The great thing about 3D printing is it's a wonderful gateway into engineering as well. I've had to learn a lot of engineering in order to get my prints up to snuff. And I recently designed a hinge that I will be putting on this helmet and a lot of my other helmets. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't gotten into 3D printing. Wouldn't see the need for it.
What do you think, before the last question, of the egalitarian potential of 3D printing itself, the ability for people to produce things that would have only been accessed to big business?
It is the great equaliser in many ways, even more so than guns. So there are a lot of patents on various different things, and unless there is a lawyer breathing down your neck while you are printing, there's nothing stopping you from printing things that you need for personal use that are maybe expensive and hard to get hold of otherwise.
So like,
I actually one of the projects I'm going to be working on for my own personal use is 3D printing a few board games that have gone out of print, and I want to print the miniatures. I want to print a more durable board for them and containers and things like that. And there's so many different things, like let's say, you know, a handle snapped off in your kitchen for a door and it's really annoying. You can easily measure out what you need, 3D print a new handle out of very durable material. PETG would actually be quite good, and just print it, and that will require a few skills, knowing a few skill sets, things like 3D modelling, 3D printing, obviously a little bit of engineering and how to fix a 3D printer if something goes wrong, but it's a worthy set of skills to have, very versatile set of skills to have, but that can apply to many different fields. And I think that's another thing that's going to be really good with these 3D printers, is people learning more, getting outside their comfort zone, printing things like that are very niche. Like if you honestly just think of anything at all, you don't have to rely on a big business to make it for you. You can just go, okay, no one else is going to make that, I'm going to do it.
So one thing I was thinking of, because I want to straighten my teeth, but dental work is super expensive, there is a new type of braces called Clearline, and they are designed by 3D printers in 3D models. And I saw this amazing article of an engineering student who fixed his own teeth using resin, a certain type of dental resin, and he created clear lines that were modelled to his jaw, and he completely corrected his own teeth himself.
Again,
which is a project
that's what I mean. If you went to a
point.
dentist, that could cost hundreds and hundreds of pounds.
And they use the exact same technology.
And you're also relying on a dentist who may not always be the best.
And they may not know as much as you do about your own mouth and feelings and structure and stuff.
But that's what I think. No one else is going to print those things specifically to your dimensions of your mouth other than you. And it can be a really good kick up the behind to say, you know, just, I need this thing, I need to get it, no one else is going to do it, I'm going to do it. And I think that's one of the best things about 3D printing. Not even just for cosplay.
When coming to the end,
yes,
what are the projects you've got lined up, and where are you going as a business?
Right, so I talked a little bit about this. So I am working on two things. First of all, I'm working on the full armour of this that I'll be wearing. That won't be done anytime soon. That's going to be a very complicated thing to do, and it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money that I need to save up. That's another thing I have advice for. If you want to do a full like armour cosplay like I'm doing, and you know it's going to have lots of little bits of thing, you're going to be using a lot of you're going to be losing a lot of resin or filament. Buy filament in bits, right? Save up for a little bit, and then get say 2 or 3 rolls of filament, and be like, okay, I can use these 3 rolls to make the chest or the shoulder pads. I can make the gloves, that kind of thing, and then wait to save up again. And do that, and in my opinion, it becomes much more affordable that way than just going, I need 20 rolls of filament, that costs £1,200.
Yes.
No,
Never do that even with another type of cosplay build, because I used to think I need to do that, but what you really need to do is use every
and
bit
also,
and
if
build
things
it
go wrong and you've wasted filament, it's much easier to say, I wasted 1 roll of filament at £25 then I wasted 1 roll of filament out of a whole lot of filament that cost £1,200 for all of it.
And it's hard to store and goes off.
Yeah, it goes off. Like, that's the thing. Like, none of my filaments, maybe it's just because I'm in a shed and it's dark and cold. I do know that there are probably better places to store it. We just don't have those places available to us at this time. But my filament's always gone off in about a year. Anyway, back to what I'm doing. So there's this. There is, I don't know if you've seen some of it, but I'm also working on a much more practical, i.e. something I can do within this year, cosplay. Power Rangers cosplay, because I've always been a fan of Power Rangers. And this one is another one I've been working on technically for a year, because I'm a perfectionist and I haven't been able to ever get it properly right, but I'm really close this time. I think I've really got it. I'm doing a Power Rangers cosplay based on a fan design. It's called King Tyranno by Art of Tran on Instagram. Shout out to him, give him a follow. He does lots of cool art. It's his design. I'm just doing the cosplay of it. And basically it's a mixture of, if you like Power Rangers, it's a mixture of Jason when he was the Red Ranger from Mighty Morphin and the Gold Ranger from Zeo combined together into one Power Ranger. It's really cool looking, and you know it has a lot of themes from both of them, and I'm printing it. I've printed half of the helmet already, and I'm sanding it and put Bondo on. That's how I figured out my current process, and that's the main thing I'm working towards. I'm planning on doing the helmet. I've got the chest piece, shield thing, and I'm going to do everything. I'm going to do, as I said, helmet, chest piece. I'm going to do gloves. I'm going to do the suit, boots, everything. I'm going to have help, of course, because I'm an idiot and I need help. But it's all going to be driven by me. I'm going to do it. She's just going to teach me what to do.
I will help you a lot.
Yes. Also, I'm going to redo bits of the Lich King cosplay, which you're probably seeing on the screen right now. There it is. There's my ugly mug. But basically, we're going to be redoing bits of that. There's the helmet, as unfortunately, it's my own fault. I didn't make that in a great way.
It has lots
it's
of
a very
pointy bits.
It has a lot of very
issues.
Basically, there's
particularly with trees.
It has a lot of pointy, thin bits, and even when you're printing it, the printer can struggle to put supports in it, and it becomes very delicate.
All the loads of bits in the top have been knocked over by walking through trees.
Yeah, and so we're going to redo that, and I'm going to redo Frostmourne, because Frostmourne, if anyone saw me at some of the conventions I went to with that, I rushed that. I did the whole thing in a day.
Yeah, we did it so quickly. It was crazy.
I did that whole sword in a day and painted it, and it wasn't up to my standards at all. It's not something.
Yeah, don't do a 3D print in a day. Don't do it. It's not good.
I was proud that I accomplished that in the amount of time I was given.
It was quite amazing. I've never done anything
I am
that
not
much.
proud of the piece as well. I'm not proud of the piece itself. I would rather have taken my time and really done a better job painting
lights
it
and stuff
smoothing
as well.
it. Yes.
And you're going to print me Jaina's staff, which I'm very looking forward to.
And those are kind of the projects I'm doing. I've got a few things that I'd like to do in the future. I'd like to do a Halo cosplay. I'd like to do more Power Ranger cosplays.
You can also probably
like to do Starkiller from Force Unleashed, specifically in the DLC thing, the Darth Starkiller thing, when he's like all edgy looking with the helmet and stuff. I want to do that.
Yeah.
I've got.
You can
most
probably
of that.
make some extra details for Mechanicus, maybe out of resin.
Yeah.
Because of how kind of cluttered their outfits are,
Yeah.
it'd be really good to have lots of small pieces
Yes.
that we could attach to like the claws and stuff like that at the back. Also, at some point, I don't know ever when this is going to happen, we're probably going to work together to build Sanguinius at some point, because that's never really been done. And it would look so good with my Saints.
I'm going to look so fabulous, and I'll be a giant space marine. Right, and I'll be able to tower over people.
Yes.
I'll be like,
it's probably going to be really dangerous as a
I
costume.
am a space marine. I am a Primarch. Hopefully I won't accidentally step on people. It would be an accident. I don't want to step on people. I'm not mean. I won't step on people unless they try it on. Yes.
Yeah, but I think the more important to Space Marine is not treading on people. It's actually falling out of your giant costume.
Yes.
I feel like that would be a concern.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to quickly look to see if anyone has any questions. Well, somebody went, "Hey guys, what are you talking about today?" Well, you've seen, because we talked about it. Hope you enjoyed our stream.
Yes. So I'm just going to go... What? No? Okay.
So, before we go follow Jamie at Resilient Prints on Instagram and Facebook.
Yes.
And remember to follow me on Black Dahlia on Instagram and Dahlia Designs, which is my photographer.
You will be able to watch this video on after a pre-recorded version of this video on YouTube
under Black Dahlia.
Yes. Anywhere else you want to put it?
On Twitch as well. And
it'll also be here on Twitch.
Facebook as well.
Yes, probably on Facebook. There you go.
Yes. Okay.
Good job.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Everyone have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.